We are live. Hello, hello, hello. It is National Family Health Day, or was somewhere in this time frame. We pre-planned all these out, so it's somewhere right around this time. Doesn't make a difference because we're just going to be talking about family health and genetics and all that fun stuff. I'm wearing Batman today, so feeling good. All
I
right.
guess I'm Robin, huh?
Yes, Batman and Robin today. I like it. All right, so we're going to be talking about. Um, I thought there was a few ways we could go with this, but it seems there's still a lot of confusion, and rightfully so, about what is how does genetics play? Did I genetically pass down ADHD or OCD or what? Depression, anxiety. What? How am I involved with this? So that's a great question, and I think it's definitely something we should talk about. And so let's kind of jump into this. Uh, the term epigenetics essentially means the environment and the stresses of the environment and how it impacts gene expression, which is are the genes on or off. That's just a kind of a generic kind of statement about that. So when we say that, it's how are your food, your diet, your sleep, your stress, your all of that stuff. How is it impacting genetic expression or turning on and off genes? Okay, and so epigenetics plays an important role. Actually, plays a much more important role than just genetics themselves. And so, let's dive into this a little bit. Heather, I always put Heather on the spot because she knows everything. She's Wikipedia. She's a human Wikipedia. Um, I have a son, and or kind of a scenario, and they have ADHD. Did I pass like my ADHD or my OCD or my anxiety down to them? Is it direct correlation? Is kind of what I'm asking. I have it, therefore they will have it, or they do have it because of me.
Um, yes, I hear that a lot, and this is not one problem. It's a great question, but one thing that kind of hurts my heart when it gets asked is a lot of times there is guilt associated with this question,
Yes. Yes.
and we cannot control what our DNA is. So it is not like fault wise, it's not your fault, but is there a genetic component? Absolutely. But what we know more and more, research is just exploding in this field. We've known about epigenetics for a long time, but in recent years, it's not like stair steps. It is like phew, the amount of information that's coming out about this. And so, is ADHD due to genes? Yes and no. Yes, there's a genetic component. No, we are not powerless. It does not mean that it is a certainty that your kids will have ADHD. If they do have ADHD, you still can control how those symptoms play out. Like Brian said, when we do the right things, and we can give some specific examples of that, it turns on and off different expressions of those genes and or their severity. So it is not a hopeless situation any more than knowing that heart disease or cancer runs in your family. There are still healthy decisions you can make that vastly decrease your risks, but they don't
100%.
eliminate them. Yeah.
Yes. Got a little puppy over there. Is that what I see?
Yes.
Saw an ear pop up. Okay.
That's
And puppies make
Chewy.
us happy. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Chewy and Patchouli are happy epigenetic factors on my gene expression.
There you go. Like that. There we go. Yeah, so, I love that you point out, parents have this, is this my fault? Did I do something wrong? Did I pass this on? And, you pass on genetics. That's just, that's how life is expressed and that's what happens. But, it's not quite that simple. It's not simply, I did this, it's my fault sort of thing. And a lot goes into this, right? Like, so, Brittany does a lot with genetics and, all that. And so, 120 days prior to conception is important for essentially what's happening in the genetics that we express. And so, you just have to think it's not the inherent stress that you're under 24 hours ago or a week ago. There's a lot that goes into this and it can be very overwhelming and confusing, but the main point is it's not your fault. And I feel so bad for some parents because they'll have this amazing kid and they have a particularly difficult diagnosis and they want another child, especially, but they're like, I don't know if this is my fault. If I have another kid, could we handle two with this diagnosis? And so there's a lot that goes in there, a lot of heartbreaking questions involved. But the main point I want to emphasize, and Heather already did, is a lot goes into this, but it's not your fault. There's a lot that can play into this, a lot of environmental factors that can play into this. That is really, in the end, a massive play in this is environment, because we sit more, we don't exercise, our food, so there's a lot that we can play into this. So you have power and you do have control and expression of your genes. There's actually studies where they've shown meditation or positive thinking for 20 minutes will start changing the expression of some of your genes. That's 20 minutes, right? So it's kind of cool. So we do have a lot of power in this. And then also, if we have these diagnoses, we still have a lot of power in changing the expression of this. So this is by no means a hopeless cause. And so I think that's probably one of the more important things that I like to convey is this isn't, you are not doomed to anything. Okay.
Right. And since you mentioned that it's really important what happens 120 days before conception, I want to mention also that what research consistently lets us know is that it is not just the mother's health, it is also that the health of the sperm is impacted by what the dad does. And so I thought I would mention that because I think that's a bit less intuitive. I'm
sorry, dads. We're 50% of the genetics. We actually, our genetics are involved with placenta and cord. Okay, so short cord syndrome is something that we see quite commonly where the cord's not long enough, and so there can be some complications during the birthing process. So it's not mom, it's us dads. Okay, so that's a big question, and that's unfortunate that a lot of blame has been put on mom. Mom, none of this can happen without mom, but dads, you got 50%. So you are half in, and so we got to take control of our own health too. So
yeah, and it's not just once they're born what they're exposed to. I mean, it's prior to conception, it's during conception. If moms go through emotional trauma, that is the environment of the baby in that moment. Just like when they're born, in the environment matters. There's been, I mentioned omega-3s in the past, like how that's a 2 to 3 greater impact on ADHD expression. And when we're talking about the research I've read on that specifically is ADHD, but most of the things, if not all the things we're talking about, would apply to autism, learning differences, et cetera, many, many different neurodevelopmental struggles. But what I wanted to share is that's also not just at birth, giving kids, not at birth, you don't give kids a pill at birth, but anyway, when they're on this planet, they have been born, they're several years old, but also when there have been studies where randomly some of the moms were given omega-3 supplements and others weren't. And it was a massive difference in the level of attention when these infants were 6 months and 12 months old, and years down the road, they had greater mental abilities. So that just to point out that it starts before conception, it's during conception, and it's after. And it's never too late to have an impact on our gene expression. We also can do things even as we're moving into, middle age and more into the senior years as well.
Love all that. Yeah. So Brittany is what's the word I want to look for? I don't want to certified in preconception. Okay. So she has some natural preconception certification. And omegas is one of the top supplements that she's going to suggest to you, right? And I love that what you're saying, because it all plays a role, whether we're sitting, whether we're exercising, the supplements we're consuming or not consuming. And I'll tell you what, let's jump on this real quick, because I think this is an important topic. We're talking about environmental stresses, so people are thinking exercise, eating, but emotional, right? Like a couple that is not in the best emotional state, that plays a role on the infant's expression and how they're coming out in their genes. And so when we talk about this, that's a very important aspect of it. Is there a support system in the womb? Dads, can you be supporting mom Yes, you can, and you're ultimately impacting the genetic expression of that child that isn't, but hasn't been born yet. So that's so important.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about the impact in utero that the
Mhm.
sound of the parents' voices have on the baby, and how when they're born, the scent of the parent is one of the most powerful stimulators, that connection is unbelievably powerful. And that's one reason why when babies are preemies or they have a traumatic birth and they're in NICU, even for a short period of time, they are so fragile during this time, and they don't get some of that same exposure and being held, and that why so often these babies will end up having neurodevelopmental struggles. It doesn't mean they're not reversible again, but omega-3 is one of the best supplements. But the same type of research has found that food dyes, artificial preservatives, lead
Mm.
have about the same impact as the omega-3s. There are so many. There have been a lot of studies in the past 10 years, specifically initiatives for kids with, uh, they call it disabilities. I always like differences, but learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, showing that uh, products that are antibacterial, there's certain ingredients
Mm.
that can have negative, cause negative gene expression. I think a lot of people know about BPA, and there are
Yeah.
different things that are made to use plastics or things that are rubber-based products that make them pliable, or linings of food cans,
Yes.
and how big of an impact. A lot of people think about those things in terms of cancer, and that is true, but it's also very much involved in neurodevelopment. So a lot of the things you may know about decreasing cancer risk might also apply to neurodevelopment, or even degenerative diseases later on.
Man, you had two great points I want to talk about there. One's gone. The BPA impacts. It's so I studied this a little bit in college. I wrote a paper up on it. But BPA and estrogen mimicker, and so it influences parental hormonal expression, so estrogen and uh, testosterone. So there's an impact in fertility. We oftentimes see this in fish because the chemical buildup there. But like coffee, like the little plastic coffee cups. Right? I don't have one, but those can leach some of that sometimes. It's you're like, this is
Yeah.
everywhere. How do I escape this? Sometimes uh,
Yeah. They're
it does
used,
get a
I
little
mean, they're
more.
used in baby bottles. Like, why?
Yeah,
Why? But so you need to look at the triangle. There's
yeah,
usually a triangle with a number in it, and just pull it up online. It will tell you which ones, at least with today's knowledge, we know are safe, and which ones can cause harm. And of course, that information is being updated almost, it seems like daily, because there's so much research coming out. But even things like Teflon and Scotch Guard, things that are
mhm.
anti-stick, carpet cleaners, uh, there's just so many. There's so many things. It's and this we're not talking about mild impact. The more and more the research comes out, it is unbelievably powerful. And you were talking about the BPA and estrogen and the hormones. Uh, there is a hormone link. For example, girls with ADHD are more likely to have polycystic ovarian syndrome (PCOS),
Mm, yep,
and so even those things, they can be separate. They can also be very connected.
100%. Uh,
Yeah.
it finally came back to me what I want to talk about, and I think we could probably talk on this for a few minutes here. Is antibiotic. Okay, so believe it or not, okay, and this is newer science, but your biome, or the viruses and bacteria in your skin and in your intestinal tract, impact and dramatically can impact your gene expression. So you are who you are can be impacted by that, and in your brain you're like, that's kind of wild, okay? But the bacterial growth, impacts digestion, behavior, hormonal expression, gene expression. And so if we're consuming a lot of antibacterial products, inadvertently or intentionally, that's going to impact the expression, essentially, of the bacteria, and that impacts us. So there's a direct correlation there. I mean, that, I say correlation. It directly impacts you, no matter what you think. It does, because they influence serotonin levels and some other hormonal levels. And so I think we touched on it maybe a week or two ago. Just like, it's like a secondary brain, they call it usually. And there's a heart brain too that they just found, which is kind of cool. But the gut is a second brain, and so when we're talking about the vagus nerve and the fight or flight system, that is so intimately tied. And I always kind of it's always tough when you hear kids that struggle with ear infections. They've been on 12 rounds of antibiotics, and you just know it's impacting that biome.
Yeah. I mean, I would really, a lot of time, I think a lot of people watching have probably heard about antibody resistance. Like, people have been on so many rounds of antibiotics that their body, it doesn't even work in their body anymore. And then you have to increase the dosage, try different ones. And that's a real concern with, I mean, there's a time and a place where those are necessary,
100%.
but there is healthy bacteria and there is unhealthy bacteria. I mean, that's why we talk about taking probiotics, talking about the second brain being the gut. Those are completely intertwined. If we try to create, we're talking about thinking about things in the environment, but that doesn't mean living in a bubble to where our genes learn to be sort of weak, not able to handle when the absolutely inevitable stressors come along. One thing I wanted to say before I forget, because you mentioned trauma, and we've talked about how it can be in utero or at birth. Understand too that trauma does not, the abuse or whatever does not have to happen directly to the child. Witnessing violence, and that doesn't even have to be in person. It can be down the street, it can be on TV, or hearing stories about something that happened to someone. That also can register as trauma. ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are extremely tied to future physical, mental, cognitive health. If you have 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, and you can have more than one within the same event. In other words, mom was abusive, CPS showed up, I was pulled from the home. Right there, you can have at least 2, and then it keeps going. But if you have 4 or more ACEs, and that means before the age of 18, you have a over 32 times higher chance of having learning disabilities. I mean, that's just one stat. The stats on suicide risk, depression, anxiety, cancer, heart disease, it is through the roof.
That's skyrocketing.
So there's nothing more important than protecting kids from trauma and yourself. So it's not just that if you're escalated because you're going through a hard time, it can escalate the child. We talk about mirror neurons and all of that, but it's also them witnessing it. If there's even a lot of research about if parents have been exposed to this many ACEs, if mom and dad, it's been divided even by gender, but if they've been exposed to ACEs, how much more likely that is to impact the child, even if they don't face one themselves. How attached are you? Do you have a certain, maybe avoidant attachment style because of things that have happened to you that can impact your child's development? So there's so many layers there. But the good news is there also has been research. It doesn't mean we don't want to protect our kids from that, obviously, from countless reasons. But there has been a ton of research about how exercise, we've talked so many times about the benefits of exercise, all the different chemicals that are released, all of the different cognitive functions that improve. But one of the biggest benefits of exercise is that in some studies, it's finding, I feel like this is a strong statement, but I want to report what the research says, that it can completely eliminate the impact of stress. I'm going to say stress, not trauma, and those aren't the same thing. Right. Okay. Completely eliminate the impact of stress that was formerly there. And another really cool thing to understand about epigenetics is even after the exposure to something that has impacted gene expression, whether it's positive or negative, the impact lives on. There's a cell memory that continues to impact the brain. That can be bad news. Like, okay, I removed myself from this abusive situation that my child and I were in. It's also good news because when we expose them to the right things, that healthy pathway continues forward. And the other thing is we have parent cells, and then of course there's regeneration of cells in the brain, like the daughter-son cells, and those parent cells tell the child cells, the daughter cells in the brain, what kind of cell they are going to be. And so it's really cool when you start doing the right things, the ripple effect of that and how it continues to take things in the right direction.
100%. And so I want to just kind of go back, but not like so far back, but like when you talk about exercise and reversing this, we'll call it stress, right? I think I really like that. Obviously, it can't reverse what happened to you, but it can, genetically and like, fight or flight system, it all has an impact on that. And what I love about that is, look, when you say exercise, you could be talking about walking, you could be talking about weightlifting, you could talk about whatever you want to do, but it's still exercise, right? And to have such a dramatic impact on your gene expression, that gives you power. I mean, that's power. That's power to the individual. That's power to the parents. Like there's power there. I can go walk. We can spend time as a family and do walk or go hiking or whatever. That's the main message I ultimately wanted to get across today is you have power. You can do this. And so I love that you brought that up because there's lots of other things you can do. Breathing does all this or it has a great impact on the two. But I just love that it's so empowering, right? Like you're not stuck. You're not stuck.
Absolutely. I love that so much. One thing I want to just finish out a thought that I was talking about, how if parents have been exposed to ACEs, how it can impact child development. It is less about, as far as how it impacts the child, it is less about what a parent has been through prior to conceiving, et cetera, than it is about whether they have dealt with it. You deserve to deal with and get the support you need and work through anything that's happened in the past that was traumatic for you. You deserve that. Additionally, when you have a cohesive personal narrative, you've made sense of the experiences, you found meaning in adversity, it drastically reverses what otherwise could have been the impact on the child. So I do want to share that. Yeah.
I'm just, you sparked a thought on this, and sleep. I'd have to go back and reread the book, but because I don't remember the exact stat. But soldiers who experienced some sort of trauma in war, right? If they were able to sleep the night of that same or the same day, their brain was able to process that emotional trauma easier. I'm not saying it was less painful, but it gave their brain an opportunity to start processing that information versus if they didn't sleep, then they saw some other genetic expressions and stuff like that. So sleep, I mean, that ultimately helps us with all of this stuff too, right? The cool thing that I read was your brain literally just kind of pulls itself out essentially and looks at the problem with no emotion, which in my mind I was like, wow, that's so cool. But it strips the emotion out and tries to process the trauma, right? And so I say that partly as just a parent. If your kiddo is getting bullied or something, it's so important for you to be there, but also to make sure they get to sleep and just to feel comfortable in their own bed, right? And so because that ultimately plays a role in how they process it and all that stuff. And so because as a parent, I don't always appreciate my kids crawling into my bed and kicking me, but for them that's comfort.
Right.
And in my brain I'm like, this is their comfort, this is where they're comfortable, and I know that I'm benefiting them through that, even though I lose a little bit of sleep. So it all plays a role together. Okay.
Yeah. One of the biggest benefits of sleep that just doesn't get talked about enough is what Brian's talking about. That is the time when the greatest memory consolidation happens. And so that can be memory for school, like but also processing and making sense of what's happened. The brain will put in the recycle bin. I don't need this part anymore, but let me connect these dots and put them in an organized file cabinet in my brain. It's brain defrag time. Remember years ago when it was like Pac-Man on your computer to defrag, and then it would process better. That is one of the benefits of sleep. And that's one reason why if individuals don't sleep well, they can kind of wake up in a sort of chaotic state of mind, just pinball machine going off, because they didn't have that defrag and consolidation time and figuring out what to discard and what to make sense of to use for later.
100%. And we've all heard about the who was it, Michelangelo, who would have a problem and he'd take a nap and then his brain would essentially solve it, right? The brain's an amazing thing. It's such a cool thing. To think that we only have a fractional understanding of what it can do and all the possibilities is amazing. But in the end, sleep is so vital for emotional health, cognitive health. And, one of the things that I'm sure you see this too, and I just want to touch on this before we get off, but the medications that we take, look, I understand there's a place and time for everything. So this is not criticism, but when we're taking a stimulant, right, and then we're trying to fall asleep and we're struggling to fall asleep or stay asleep, it's ultimately kind of impacting their emotional and cognitive well-being. And so I know that's always a struggle for parents, right? Because they're having trouble in school, and so we feel like we need this medication, but then they're not falling asleep or they're waking up all the time. So it's a tough battle, parents. Sometimes I just want you to know that we are here for you. Heather and I are definitely here for you for any conversations you need or any help you need. But that is one of the struggles I commonly see with my kiddos who are on some form of a stimulant for attention and focus issues.
Yeah. One other thing I'll say before we get off here is, we had this conversation sort of in celebration of Family Health History Day, which actually falls on Thanksgiving. It's always on Thanksgiving every year because you're with your family. That's the concept behind it. That
makes sense. That way.
But what I wanted to share about that is also, as you're having these conversations, it is important to know family health history as much as possible. I know we work with a lot of families who have adopted children. Some of that info may not be available, but you can always do like 23andMe, that kind of thing, and get some information about potential risks so that you can ward those off with epigenetic factors. But there is a difference between family health history and genetics. And the reason I say that is that, yes, you might share some of the same genes, not identical, but you might share some of the same genes, but which part of that is genes and which part of it has to do with behaviors and cultures and traditions and the environment of the family are there. So the risk also, aside from epigenetic factors, might be less than the gene itself, because what things have we kind of done as a family that aren't necessarily healthy? And so I wanted to point that out. Those are not synonymous. And that also gives another layer of hope, because all behaviors and choices and environment are things that we can change. And those are things that the family shares in addition to the genes.
Love it. In the end, what you just said is there's hope, that we have control. So I love that. That's ultimately what I wanted to convey today. And I love that you brought that up, because there is an important distinction there. Okay. You see families, we have a family history of diabetes, but if you actually kind of dig down, there's a family history of some unhealthy, maybe eating habits, right? Or lack of exercise. So, there may be a genetic component, but there's also a massive lifestyle habit too that can play a very significant role in that as well. So, all right. I don't have anything else to talk about today. Heather, you?
No, I think that's good.
Yep. We're going to end it on hope. You have the power, parents. You are in control. Kiddos, you are in control as well. You have the power. So Heather and I are just here to help and assist y'all. All right, Heather, everybody wants to know, where can I find more of Heather? How do they find you?
At The Hidden Churn on Instagram or Facebook, or Brain Balance of the Woodlands, Katy, Mansfield, or Southlake.
All right. And you definitely want to go follow those pages, because Heather also has another podcast where she talks about other things, but a lot of similarities in between. But you want to go, I go listen myself, so I always go learn. That is Tuesday at 11. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so you can find them on those pages. And this week you're talking about?
This week, because it's Thanksgiving week, my cohort on that one's not available. So we're doing a replay of a gratitude show I did. And it's more about be thankful. I really talk about the developmental stages of gratitude, what it means, how you cultivate it, and how it impacts healthy brain development. It's so much more than giving thanks.
I love that. Actually, we should probably do a podcast on that here in the future. That would be a good one. I would like, that's always good. Giving, one of my mentors encouraged me recently to express gratitude. And he actually asked me to write it down. And it's funny, because when you actually express it and you write it down, sort of thing, you start dwelling upon it and thinking about it, and it ultimately starts impacting your behavior and your attitude, ultimately expressing or changing my gene expression. So there you go. All right. It's all tied together. I tell you, the madness is all tied together somehow, some way. All right. You can get a hold of me at 972-387-4700. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Dallas Synergy Chiropractic. We will not be back next week because I will be enjoying turkey and football. I'm sure Heather will be doing something. She's probably reading a book because she's so smart. But I will be enjoying some football and some whatever we're eating that day. So I'm excited for that. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe Thanksgiving. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. I'm also going to let Heather say, your final words.
Chewy just stretched on camera. Stretching is also excellent for relaxation and mindfulness and epigenetic factors. So I just saw him do that, and I had to say that.
Look at me. Heather even has her dog stretching in epigenetically.
Thank you for demonstrating, buddy.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so all right, we will be back in. We'll be back. We will post that and we will let you know what's happening. But we will not be here next week. Stay safe. Enjoy your family. Have a great gene expression on Thanksgiving Day. Lots of positivity and lots of good food. All right, we'll see you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye bye.
Bye bye.